Hello, good evening, and welcome to Fact Sheet live on ETV Ghana. It is also live on Nisim in Tamale, Nisim in Bolgatanga. We are streaming live on our Facebook page. You can go there and be a part of the conversation. Remember, your comments are welcomed, as well as your contributions. If you have any question to ask any of our panel that will be engaging tonight, you can leave that on our Facebook live feed. My name is Sefa Dankwa, sitting in for your regular host, Samuel Ishon. Tonight, what really started as a minor blip actually developed into a full-blown crisis. It happened somewhere around last week, Monday, when people were attempting to purchase credit onto their ECG meters. Prior to that, actually, there have been concerns raised by customers of the Electricity Company of Ghana regarding some of the challenges that they were facing after the implementation of the utility tariffs upward adjustment. Now, this became another matter that a lot of customers of the ECG had to contend with. People had to move from one vending center to the other in search for credit. But the ECG came out, I think about a few hours later, claiming that they had resolved the matter. People had to still go around, scamper around to search for credit. At some point in the capital city of Accra, many customers of Electricity Company of Ghana had to form long queues after the ECG came out with an announcement that the issue had been resolved, and customers could go to their district offices to go and purchase credit onto their meters. As we speak, the Electricity Company of Ghana says that it has been able to deal with most of the issues as we speak, but information that we're picking from other regions indicates that people are still going through the same challenge. Just before I came on air, I had an information from the manager in charge of external communications of the Electricity Company of Ghana, who is in the person of Mr. Charles Ni Ayiku. And I'll quickly run through the information that he sent, and you can also make judgment of it. Now, he says that this is an update. Please, this is to inform you that the meters which were not stable, including the Nuri and Clue meters, are now vending smoothly, except for a few others which are slow in some areas. The areas he did not specify. We are currently working on stabilizing those in the Ashanti region and then activating the mobile app, which is currently being deactivated. All third-party vending points are fully operational. We already have in place a help desk to assist these third-party vendors who are having challenges with the appropriate firewall and other information to enable them to send without any hitch. All these have led to people forming their own theories as to how the technical hitch happened. Some are saying that it is internal. Some are saying it's external, and that the system of the Electricity Company of Ghana has been hacked into. Others are saying that there are saboteurs within the Electricity Company of Ghana who are attempting to block some form of auditing, and that's why what happened last week happened. What really led to the challenges that people, or the challenges that ECG faced with dispensing credit for people to recharge their meters. That is the focus of our conversation tonight, right here on Fact Sheet. Let's go for a quick break. When we return, I'll introduce to you my panel for tonight, and we will set the ball rolling. Many thanks for staying on with us. This is Fact Sheet live on ETV Ghana, live on Nisim in Tamale, Nisim in Bolgatanga. We're also streaming live on our Facebook page. You can go there, leave your contributions. The question that I'm asking is, what is your current situation. Are you facing a challenge in purchasing ECG credit onto your meter, or you seem to have gone to a vendor and you had been successful in getting some credits? I would want you to join the conversation with your contributions on that particular question. But joining us tonight for the conversation Mr. Charles Ni Ayuku, who is the General Manager of External Communications at the Electricity Company of Ghana. He's going to join us via Zoom. Also, Fritz Moses, who is an energy analyst at the Institute of Energy Security. He will also join us via Zoom. And Benjamin Insia, who is an energy policy analyst, who has joined us in studio. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Fact Sheet.
Good evening.
Let me start from here, Benjamin. Are you going through a similar situation?
Yes, I'm a victim of this particular systemic hiccup at ECG, and I think for the past 4 days or so, I've not been able to top up my power, and for that matter, I'm in darkness. And wanting to hear good news from ECG in terms of compensating, compensating us, because I think I have a lot of things in my deep freezer that are going waste because of this particular challenge they are facing. I may not call it a challenge because I think that at any appropriate time, or at any time of at any particular time, ECG needs to upgrade its services and also needs to upgrade its ICT systems and then platforms, so that some of these challenges may not occur, because anytime such a challenge occurs for more than 1 day, there are a lot of distractions, and there are a lot of havocs caused in homes and firms, and I'm one of the victims of these hiccups, and I think that I need to be compensated. If I'm not, maybe at the appropriate time we will reconsider some of these decisions in terms of what the consumer will deal with ECG.
You've come from a very important point, from the point of view of a customer who is being rid of having the ability to recharge his or her meter. What do you make of the responses that were given by the Electricity Company of Ghana when the issue started? They came out with a communique indicating that they had resolved the matter and that customers could go to their respective vendors and purchase their credit. It wasn't actually the truth. They later came back to say that certain selected cities or regions were affected and others had been dealt with. It was really not the case until somewhere around Saturday, when it became a full-blown issue that people had to scurry around in search of credit to ensure they get power supply into their respective homes. What do you make of how ECG responded, particularly with their communication to the issue?
I think when this particular incident happened, ECG was quick in response without giving us appropriate resolution to the matter. There's one thing responding and one thing solving it. But in terms of, in order to assure consumers of electricity that everything was fine, the communication department came earlier to give that particular statement they issued. But I think that in building trust between an entity like ECG and its customers, we need to make sure that we only communicate when there is a full resolution of that particular challenge. We don't come to assure when there's no assurance. For example, I have seen a lot of communique and press statements and maybe commentaries by ECG and their staff on various media platforms assuring me that the issue has been resolved. But around Pantine, I have been roaming across a lot of vending shops. Yet, most of these vendors are telling me that they cannot top up my power. And for that matter, I'm in darkness. So what I think they did was to quickly respond without appropriate or the professionals telling them that we may need a lot of time to resolve issues, and also telling the consumer, yes, you've come to respond to us that you are going to resolve the issues or the issue has been resolved. But the waste I have incurred, the cost I have incurred, you didn't even talk about it. And I think in apologizing to us, they must also maybe compensate us with some level of power per kilowatt or something, so that we may also use to recover some of the costs our various homes and firms are incurring.
You seem bent on the compensation bit.
Yeah, I think it is very, very necessary, because I've lost a lot, and I know I'm not the only one. Others are also losing, and for good 5 days without electricity means that if I did have certain food items, if I did have certain things I need to freeze or put in my fridge, those things all would have gone to waste. And for that matter, is it my fault? It's not my fault. It's the fault of ECG. And so in communicating to us in terms of telling us that they've assured or they've resolved these challenges, I think they need to come clear, emphatic in apologizing, also making sure that they compensate us, especially the firms and then certain households who may be facing these challenges.
Let's come to the technicalities of whatever transpired or over the period. There are a lot of people who are reading a lot of meanings into what really went on. Some are saying that they were external factors. Some are saying that they were internal factors. What do you make of these various arguments that have been proposed as we speak now? At a point in time, there were statements or there were claims that the system had been hacked by some unscrupulous persons who were trying to teach ECG a lesson.
I think there's a lot of impunity at ECG, and I think that government needs to reconsider privatizing ECG. ECG is in this quagmire because of certain political and professional interest operating at this firm, and we do so because the state owns almost 100% of this organization. It's not a joint venture. So when we begin to privatize it, there will not be that conflict between political interest and private interest. I've heard a lot of commentary around it. People arguing that professionals at ECG wanted to sabotage their manager, MD, because MD was insisting that there be a transparency audit in the metering system, right? But I mentioned earlier there's a lot of impunity, not only on the metering system and the vending challenges we are facing now, because if you also take the Auditor General's report, 2019 and 2020, so far, you weep for the state Ghana, looking at how finances are being misappropriated, looking at how contracts are being so sourced, looking at how people are ripping off the system, which is the ECG system. Now, when you add that into this particular vending challenge we are facing currently, it means that the state is not capable of managing the affairs of ECG.
But it's been a state that has been managing the affairs of ECG over a period of time now.
And if you look at the state managing the affairs of ECG over that particular period, just look at it, in the last 6 years or so, ECG is in debt of about 22 point something billion, right? And these debts are also accrued because of certain misappropriations and irregularities at this particular state-owned entity. And I think that for us to overcome these metering challenges, that has to do with professionals at this particular entity and political interest, which is the MD, because normally the MD is appointed by the party in government.
Yes.
Now, for us to balance it, we need a third party. And the third party has to be a private equity interest in ECG, which is a joint venture that I think we need as a country. Critical look at it so that we can overcome certain misappropriations and irregularities and also this particular vending challenge. Now, I heard a colleague of mine,
but before you even go to the senior colleague of yours and the statement that he made, with the argument of having a private equity in ECG, others are also of the view that why not break the monopoly of the Electricity Company of Ghana by having other entities doing the supply of electricity to customers in the country, so that it will let ECG, which is government owned, to up its game to be in competition with the privately owned electricity suppliers in the country?
I do also hold that particular view, but I think it's a long-term view in the sense that, you see, already distribution of electricity across certain parts of it, so the southern part of Ghana is done by ECG. They have their cables connected to households. They have their cables connected to substations, right? So in the short term or medium term, you cannot engage other distributors to also put up pylons or distribution lines to various homes. You get it? So maybe in the long term, we may consider it. But the shortest term, because of the debt on the books of ECG, the mismanagement at ECG, what we need to do in the short term is to get private equity interest in the management of ECG. So that even if in the long term we consider maybe...
But we attempted that with PDS?
Yeah, maybe the approach we adopted with PDS was wrong. We could bring a new model, we could bring a new framework that will be accepted by all in terms of offering some of the shares of ECG to these private equity or private interests. Now, in the earlier assertion you made or statement you made by saying that we need to also consider liberalizing distribution of electricity in certain parts of the country, we could do that, right? But that should be in the long-term interest of a state. That we have had enough of ECG operating as a monopoly. We need other entities to operate as an oligopoly or maybe to operate as a perfect competition so that when there's competition, at least the losses, commercial losses of ECG, which is about 19% or more, could be scaled down because at the end of the day, they also want to make profit. We could consider that, but in the short term, I think that we need to privatize ECG. Now, on other aspect, I also was speaking to someone and he mentioned that the challenge we are facing is also because ECG has centralized its software, right? The metering software or the power software. ECG has centralized it. And he believed that if ECG has disintegrated this software or had a backup somewhere, it shouldn't take ECG more than 5 days to resolve a software challenge, right? If that is the case at ECG, I think we need to also reconsider disintegrating in terms of hosting some of these softwares that we use in this particular metering system or whatever system. Because the reason I'm telling you there's that particular challenge of mismanagement is that at ECG, we've tried a lot of systems to control commercial losses. Have you been able to control commercial losses? No?
Not to my best of knowledge.
Yes. It means that most of the initiatives or innovations we've implemented at ECG are not working. Why are they not working? They are not working because of this conflict between professional interest and political interest at ECG. So the best thing is to maybe offload it and then make sure that a third party comes into effect, and that is private interest. I think if you go that way, that will be a best solution in terms of resolving a lot of challenges at ECG.
How confident are you that we'll be able to deal with this?
I'm 99% confident that when we privatize ECG, at least part of it is equity, ECG will be a better or a best company that will bring certain dividends to state and those private equity interests in this particular entity. If we don't do it that way, and we continue this whole scale or holistic scale of state owning all, we will continue to record debt in our books. That becomes a burden on us. ECG will continue to give us less than optimal, right, services they are supposed to give us, right? And if they continue, I will continue to blame them, and I think I will continue to call for compensation, as stated earlier, because my things were always, someone just even sent me a message that his goat head, right, on a latter note, that his goat head was in the fridge and had to go waste, right? But we need an efficient system. An efficient system cannot be managed by state in this current stature of ECG.
How do you mean?
I mean it because, you see, if you take the state-owned entities, ECG is one of the state-owned entities. If you take another distributor in the northern part of Ghana, Netco is also in debt. ECG is in debt. Can we continue as a state to incur the debt of ECG? The last time I checked the state ownership report and even the Auditor General report, in 2020, for example, the state injected a lot of cash into ECG. And that increased ECG's revenue to about 13 billion Ghana cedis. With even these 13 billion Ghana cedis, ECG was able to make a profit of 726 million Ghana cedis. These 726 million Ghana cedis, there are certain inefficiencies Without government support in 2020, ECG could have not realized these 726 million Ghana cedis we're talking about. So it means government supported them. So when are we going to stop supporting ECG amidst a lot of challenges? Resources are scarce. Today everybody is crying in Ghana. Everybody is crying in Ghana because of certain loans government has gone to contract to support this economy. And government goes to contract these loans to offset some debt, some commercial loss at ECG. The best way is to privatize it. At least there's a third party interest in it, so that the third party will play a supervisory role on the management of ECG. Because as we speak today, because it is government entity. And we know how people operate government institutions in Ghana. It is government, so government will not say anything. And I'm happy I heard the president saying that he's instructed the CEO of SIGA, State Interest and Accountability, Governance Accountability, to make sure that all state-owned entities are appropriately audited, and then if maybe sanctions applied.
In respect to the 2021 Auditor General's
report. Yeah. Right? I'm happy the government has called on this, but I still insist that some of these state-owned entities, be it a beneficiary state entity, what we normally call an essential state-owned entity, regardless of it being
essential service provider,
regardless of it being an essential service provider to the state, we need to privatize it so that some of these debts will not be on the books of government. If you don't go that way, some of these inefficiencies will come. And let me conclude. Maybe I may not go to court to seek compensation, but there are other persons who may go to court to seek compensation for these hiccups, systematic hiccup at ECG.
So you are indirectly implanting the idea of going to
I'm
court.
not implanting.
The Ghana Electricity Company of Ghana.
Others will go.
For the damages caused.
Yes, others will go. I may not go, but others will go.
But you support them when they go?
I do entirely. I will support them entirely, that they should go and seek for damages, because you cannot have a goat head and then waste it. On a lighter note, but there are a lot of people calling for certain compensations due them because of this inefficiency at ECG. And I think that is the way to. But the best way for us to go as a country, holistically or comprehensively, or looking at all multidimensional analysis, we need to privatize ECG or sell part of its equity to private.
How much of its equity must be sold?
At least 40%. 40%.
40%. But 40%, it still means that the state will be having a huge stake in the operations of that particular company.
Yes.
So how then will the private entity perform its oversight responsibility on the management of the company? Because in any case, the majority shareholder will still have to do the appointment.
Will have to do, but the company doesn't belong to the majority shareholder. There are other interests in terms of holding strategic. And you know, the board always holds strategic decisions for a company. And if I have an interest in ECG, thinking that at the end of the day, I must get my dividends from ECG, I will not sit for a board to take a decision that will not help me. I will not sit for a manager to take a decision that will not help me. I will not sit for a professional person working at ECG to hold ECG to ransom, whether by hacking the system or whether by keeping certain codes without exposing them to the MD. I will not sit, because at the end of the day, I demand dividends from the operations. And that is why I'm calling for this. For example, we have GOEL being a joint venture. It's doing well. Most GCB is a joint venture organization. It's doing well. So most of these joint venture organizations are doing well because the third party will have to put an eye on them. And if we implement that particular framework or model at ECG, I think that ECG will not be recording losses, irregularities, will not be recording sole sourcing contract, whereby if you look at the Auditor General report, ECG was mentioned. If you go to the Ministry of Energy and the Auditor General report, ECG was mentioned more than 20 times from 2019 and 2020. Repeated irregularities they don't want to correct. Right? It means that there's certain cabal of persons who are not willing to change. And they are not willing to change because they are maybe brought there by political interest. And you know how our state-owned entities are run. If a politician brings you there or a government brings you there, sometimes even feel superior to the MD that is working because we were all brought in by a government appointee.
Let me ask this question. And with the current state of the electricity company of Ghana, how do we navigate the processes of bringing in a private entity to take a portion of the company?
I think that we have to assess the assets and liability of ECG, right?
And taking into consideration its current debt that is sitting on its books.
Yes, so the debt, you are a private entity or with private interest. Maybe Sefa, one of the richest in Ghana, wants to buy the debt of ECG. I'm buying it. The debt is about 1.7 billion or 7 billion Ghana cedis. I'm buying that particular debt. And buying that debt also means that I owe 40% of the shares of ECG. So you clear that debt off. So when you clear that debt off, it means that ECG has no debt. There are no liabilities on the books of ECG because that debt has been cleared off, and that becomes my equity in the operations of ECG. When it becomes my equity in the operations of ECG, also means that any decision ECG is going to take, because I have invested, demanding dividends at the end of the year, my decisions will also hold strategically, right? If MD is not working in my interest as a private participant in the management of ECG, I have a say, right? And that is what I think, that when we implement this particular framework at ECG, ECG will set up. We will hire an MD who is professional, who is not coming there to kowtow to the whims and caprices of the political class or maybe the government in power.
Benjamin, I'm still thinking around, the processes that will lead to a private equity coming into the operations of the electricity company of Ghana. Because I'm looking at a company that has not been making profit over a period of time now. Okay. Now, if I go in and buy that liability of, let's say, $2 billion or $3 billion, and over a period of about a decade, the company has not been able to make such an amount. If I am an investor, I am investing into the company to ensure that I make profit. How will I then ensure that I am getting the returns on the investment that I have made, particularly with regards to just buying off the liability, which happens to be the debt?
I think we have not considered properly the assets of ECG and the capacity to give you the return of investment. ECG has a capacity. For example, if ECG reduces its commercial losses of about 20-something% to about 15%, that becomes an add-on profit or revenue to its operations. That is one. We also know that ECG is not doing well currently because of government's inability to pay what is due ECG.
Because ECG but also ECG's inefficiency in ensuring that...
So ECG's inefficiencies has to do with commercial losses. That is one. And also certain irregularities in its operations, which is managerial irregularities. That is two. The third aspect we've not been talking about is government owing ECG. And if I say government, that is central government inability to pay ECG what is due them. For example, ECG supplies electricity to government agencies.
But if I support you?
Yes, if ECG support in what way? Normally those supports that come in are supposed to offset government debt to ECG. I hope you get it. So if ECG comes and maybe a private like yourself, you come in and then buy the liability of ECG, you will be insistent on ECG collecting money from government. Right? So at the end of the year, even if government pays ECG what is due them, that also becomes revenue stream. Another form of revenue stream to the operations of ECG. You reduce commercial losses, it becomes another revenue stream. You also have to look at the managerial inefficiencies in the system. Operating of it, whereby certain contracts are single sourced, whereby withholding taxes are not being paid to GRA, whereby pay as you earn, which is what we normally call personal income tax, are not paid to GRA. All these inefficiencies, when you have that private interest in it, you make sure that the right things are done. If the right things are done, I bet you make a lot of money from ECG. ECG is a cash cow. But because it has a lot of political interest in this managerial decisions, that is why today we are in crisis. And that is why today we have this systematic challenge whereby there's a lot, vending becomes a problem. People are arguing that, people are giving commentary that some ICT professionals at the ECG are holding the MD to ransom. Why are they holding MD to ransom? They are holding because maybe the ICT professional there or the IT professional there came in through political interest. The MD also came in through political interest. So through political interest, they think that we are equal.
Two political interests at loggerheads.
At loggerheads,
at the same company.
They are equal.
That is supposed to operate and be profitable.
Profitable. They are equal. And so for that matter, that conflict will be there. And that is why I'm calling for that. I think that when a third party comes in, political interest is reduced to maybe 60%. The private interest comes in about 40%. And let's see ECG in the next two or 3 years. ECG is one of the best institutions.
I just clicked my phone because somebody sent in a question. That, for example, if he says that your arguments that you're making is valid, but he's also asking whether we've considered the idea of establishing systems that allows ECG not to be influenced politically, in a sense that the people are not brought in from the political sphere into the operations of the Electricity Company of Ghana. That the ECG itself has a structure that dictates, okay, who becomes the MD, how they generate their own revenue, how much they even contribute to government over a period of time. Can we also consider this? Is this viable in any sense?
It is. It is in the sense that when you look at it from a framework perspective, maybe in terms of considering some of the approaches you may want to employ at ECG, it can be one of them. However, we all know our political structure, and we know our political system, or the governance system in Ghana, whereby government thinks that if at the end of the year, or in reading my budget, I give you something to operate, I must have an interest in that. So it will be quite difficult for us to dissuade or take government from the operations of ECG if you don't privatize it. It will be more difficult. Today, if you insist on any approach you may bring on board in terms of what this sender just sent in, that government should be off in the operations of ECG.
Yes.
We may try, but hidden, right, latent, government may find itself again in its operations. Because at the end of the day, government will have to appoint board. Because ECG is state-owned. Until the structure changes from state-owned to private entity, joint venture entity, where other private interests can also bring their members on the board, government is the sole institution that forms the board of ECG. So no matter, it can be one of the alternatives in terms of policy formulation or models we may consider at ECG or employ at ECG. But I think that if you employ this particular model as ECG, it will not work in this current structure of ECG, where government is the 100% sole owner. Because government still will appoint the board of ECG. And if government appoints the board of ECG, strategically, any decision ECG will take, it is still government. So unless third party comes in, it is not going to work.
Benjamin Insia, who is energy policy analyst, is bent on the argument that we should introduce private equity into the operations of the Electricity Company of Ghana. I do not know what you think about this particular argument that he is proposing. He believes that when a private equity is introduced into the operation of ECG, it will let ECG stand on its toes and operate efficiently and optimally, and also increase their revenue generation schemes, so that it will give more money to government as well as the private entity earning dividends or having returns on its investment. Let's go for a quick break. When we return, now I'll ask a question as to whether in the interim we have not decided, or we have not thought of privatizing the Electricity Company of Ghana. What do we do to forestall any unforeseeable or foreseeable challenges with issues of getting credits onto your meters? And I would want you to share with me, I mean, how the situation is like wherever it is that you may find yourself across the country, and I'll gladly read that Let's go for a break. When we return, the conversation continues here on Fact Sheet. Thanks for staying on with us. This is Fact Sheet live on ETV Ghana. It is live on Nisim in Tamale, Nisim in Bolgatanga. We're also live on Facebook. Leave your comments there. A couple of comments that I have over there. Let me read this one. This one says that, Sefa, I have been trying to load credit onto my meter for the past 3 days. I've been going around, but still vendors are saying that the network is off. This one says that these are private messages that people are sending to me. Anyway, this one says that it says, I am Mark. Sefa, what Benjamin is saying is true. Most of the state-owned companies must be privatized if indeed they are to be efficient in their operations. Okay, Mark, thank you for the message there. This one is from Joe. Joe says that, Sefa, good evening. I'm watching you live on Fact Sheet, great show, but I disagree with Benjamin. I think that government can try as much as possible to operate some of the state-owned enterprises, particularly ECG, which is a sensitive service provider, and make it profitable in the long run. Thank you very much, Joe, for that message over there. This one is coming from Getty. Getty says that, Sefa, long time. I have also been going around in search of credits to buy. Unfortunately, I have not been able to recharge for the past 3 days. So I don't know when I'll be able to recharge. My credit is left with 5 Ghana cedis. So if it's done, I don't know what will happen. We were expecting the general manager in charge of external communications of the Electricity Company of Ghana, Mr. Charles Nia Iku. Unfortunately, he hasn't been able to join the feed on Zoom because of network challenges. We're also expecting Fritz Moses, who happens to be energy analyst with the Institute of Energy Security. He has also not been able to join because of network issues over there. We sincerely apologize for that. But we have some, I think, some 7-8 minutes to wrap up the conversation. One question that I'm asking is, as we speak now, the government is not thinking about bringing in a private entity, because as I mentioned earlier, we attempted it before with the PDS. It did not work out. If we are to go into bringing in a private equity, which model should we use? That's one question. Double-barreled question for the final submission. The final question will be, if we take away the idea of bringing in private equity, what do we do as a state to ensure ECG is operating efficiently and raking in the needed revenue?
I think with respect to PDS and ECG, earlier mentioned, I think that we're not able to implement that particular architecture because of the way it was rolled out, because there was not much stakeholder engagement in terms of consultations and view sharing or position sharing in the best interest of street in terms of how we are going to privatize ECG. We just came out, and then the media started mentioning that ECG has been privatized to PDS or something like that without further engagement, because we are in a state where there are various interests, and if you want to roll out a policy, various interest views must be collated in building a consensus or in building a better strategy in terms of engaging other third party or private equity to hold an essential service provider or a service provider that is quite sensitive to the state. I hope you get it. So the reason PDS was knocked out was because we didn't do further engagement of all political actors or state interest in terms of in terms of that particular model we adopted. What I think in the coming days, if we may want to go into privatizing ECG, which I think in the short term we can consider, is that we need to engage all interests, civil society space, political parties, because governance in Ghana has not been run by one political party since the Fourth Republic. One comes and one goes.
Yeah.
So we need to engage all, get their positions on the best way that we can privatize ECG. When we consider that all arguments point to a particular direction, that it means that is what majority of Ghanaians are insistent on. We can just rule out a nice model that will help all of us. Now, if we don't go into privatization, as you stated, which is coming to your next question, if you don't go that direction of privatizing or getting a third party to hold interest in ECG, what I think is that we need to recruit the best of brains to manage the affairs of ECG.
And we also the best of brains. What do you mean by
what I mean is that we need experts who have managed energy sector entities somewhere, have done well, have even managed. We have Ghanaians abroad who have been managing energy sector entities in other countries. If Ghana can even bring them in to support in the management of ECG, we must consider that, and not only look at persons that may be supported us in campaigning or supported us in winning an election, but we need a professional who will come in and overturn the wrongs at ECG and makes it right. So that is one person we need also to be. And ECG also need a framework. What I think we need a framework that looks at how persons are recruited, apart from the MD level or the board of directors level, in terms of the operational staff. I think ECG needs a framework that looks critically at how persons are employed to ECG. Right? We need to critically assess whether these persons we are employing have that particular knowledge to man this operational area. If we do that, I think we will get the right, the best form of knowledge or expertise to man each department of ECG. In terms of clamping down on the commercial losses you have experienced of more than 19%, in terms of making sure that financially ECG stands at a position that will be revenue motivated or cost reduction motivated, so that at the end of the day ECG realizes certain profit. Now, lastly, on this vending issue, I think we going forward, I've been told the national security has come in. I've also been informed there are other third-party software or IT persons that the current MD wants to employ in to do what he calls transparency audit or something like that. I think that if this current architecture at ECG, in terms of the IT department at ECG, is not giving us the best of service delivery ECG wants, it is good we fire them.
You should fire them?
That is what I think.
All of them?
All of them. Or that is what I think, because the purpose for them being there is to give us quality services. If they cannot give us quality services, any person involved in not giving us the quality service Ghana needs or ECG needs should be fired.
Okay. Thank you very much, Benjamin Nsia, who is energy policy analyst. And before we wrap up, a very, very beautiful birthday wish going out to Matilda Anaglo Esenam. This is from Likewise Asare. He says that, grow in wisdom, and may the good Lord bless you as you celebrate your birthday today. Many thanks for staying on with us, and I will sincerely apologize once again for the inability of two of our guests to join us via Zoom. My name is Sifa Dankwa. This has been Fact Sheet. Fact Sheet returns next week. Good night.